Hi, and welcome to this exclusive interview with two altnets that are next to each other. I've got Guy Miller, who is the CEO of MS3, and Sean Royce, who is the CEO of Quicline, two networks in Hull and the East Riding of Yorkshire, right butting up to each other. But are they competing? Guy, are you competing or not?
Delighted to say we don't compete at all. We're two very different networks, Richard. So MS3 is entirely urban. We are a builder that builds to low-cost areas in urban environments that need competition and need choice. But we really focus in urban. We are self-funded, and our driver is how do we change people's products to better, more value services, while Sean operates a very different model just outside those urban areas.
Yes, and I operate a business, Quicline, in Yorkshire and Lincolnshire, but our headquarters are in Willoughby, which is a small village outside of Hull, not 5 or 6 miles, a stone's throw away from where Guy's operation is. But we provide broadband services in all the rural locations. So as you walk out of Hull, all the villages in the East Riding of Yorkshire and the rest of Yorkshire, and as you walk outside of places like Grimsby and Scunthorpe in the other side of the River Humber, where Guy is, everything down south from there, all the villages around there. We have 4 Project Gigabit contracts to go to the really deep rural areas.
Well, there must be some grey area between where it's semi-rural, semi-urban, or is it the case that it's a very clear line between what MS3 does and what Quicline does?
Yeah, look, I think actually that there are enough differences. You know, we talk about the altnets in the UK being all kind of one bucket, but there are such fundamental differences that it's not like we've not, deliberately had to look at each other's footprint to say don't build there. We just don't. If you have a subsidised model, it is always going to be properties that are hard to reach and don't have fibre. And if you look at ours, it's a pure cost model where we say, well, if a home is going to cost us more than £500 to pass it, we won't. Yeah. So fundamentally, the nature of our models is so different that we can be 5 miles away from a head office and yet not compete in any way, shape or form. It's worth noting as well that we are 100% wholesale at MS3, so we don't have a retail channel, where obviously Quicline's strategy at the moment is far more retail focused. So again, we're not even competing with partners, so it's a really nice way for us to be local to each other, look at collaboration and not really in any kind of competition at all.
Yeah, we tend to go to areas where others haven't been by definition, and they haven't gone there because they're more expensive, so often they're subsidised models. So we end up in the very hard to reach areas where it's difficult terrain, it's areas of natural beauty, there's private land, so there's all sorts of difficult building challenges. So we don't look at each other's footprint, but by almost de facto go into different areas because of the nature of our business models as well. We are vertically integrated. We have a retail operation and a wholesale operation, but the obligation around taking state aid and the public purse is you have to have an open access network, and that's how we operate.
Okay. And in terms of the different challenges between building without that BDUK funding and building with BDUK funding, it'd be interesting to learn the differences. I mean, my understanding is that sometimes the BDUK contracts are quite strict and restrictive, whereas obviously at MS3 you can do whatever you want and not do whatever you want.
They're restrictive. They're restrictive in as much that you have a pool of premises that you've got to try and connect to the network. So, and by definition, as I said earlier, they are more difficult to build to. There are different types of challenges to what Guy has. So I will have, as I said, areas of natural beauty, different things we have to talk about with the Wildlife Trust, and to make sure that we get things agreed. And we do everything as sympathetically with the councils as we can, because we are crossing beautiful areas of countryside or very, very difficult terrain. Trying to get the network there in itself is hard, let alone getting power that you need and things like that. So working with other providers. So our network build and our challenges are often very different to yours, Guy.
Yeah, and look, there's a myriad of differences, Richard. So from a build perspective, about 85% of our underground build is we are going through carriageway or footway. So we are digging up tarmac and do it. And Sean's world will be very different to that, where you're able to use, rural verges and those kind of things to deliver networks much quicker and easier. When we go underground, there is always someone else there already. And the nature of the amount of times you might have to relocate your network, or you possibly do a strike or something, is so much harder. But we are passing homes every 7 to 11 metres. There's a new home that you can pass and sell to. And that's such a different economic model. We're also able to use aerial delivery, perhaps more easier at times. And there are so many challenges there. The other difference is we have only got to answer to our shareholders, right? And we don't have to report to anyone else. We have zero subsidy in our business, and therefore, you're absolutely right, it's our decision. If we go somewhere and say, actually, that's going to look a bit pricey, let's not do it, it's a very different story to if you've committed, from government money to actually go and build somewhere and you really need to deliver it. So again, very different, but kind of individual challenges.
And Guy makes a very good point there. It's the meterage between homes. So you're talking about 7 to 11 metres or whatever it is in the urban areas. Ours is probably around 50 metres. Okay. Often 100, 200, even longer. So they're so sparsely populated. And then when you think about the urban areas, you just imagine building down a very narrow country lane. Remember those lovely narrow country lanes that you drive, where you can't get 2 cars down? Traffic management around there, those types of challenges are so much more involved, and the councils have an awful lot more say on how that is managed. So it's very different. But when you step out from it all, it's the different meterage between the premises. That's the biggest challenge.
And then there's a different dynamic as well, Richard, once you've done it, right? So doing it is hard. Once you've actually built it, we've got a completely different dynamic as well. There are places where we have built in Hull where there are now 4 fibre networks, all competing for the same customers. Now, fortunately, if you had a low cost to build, you could just about justify that if everyone does that. In rural areas, if Sean had 3 others to compete against, it'd be a very different story, because his penetration targets would be much higher than our long-term ones.
Yes. And just to finish on that, the differences, Guy is quite right. He doesn't have the reporting obligations that I will have. So if I'm taking the public purse taxpayers' money, as you would rightly expect, there's a lot of diligence to make sure that is spent in value for money. So we've got to prove value for money, prove that we're doing the right thing, and there's a lot of reporting obligations, and that is quite onerous.
Yeah. Guy, some recent news is that Cityfibre has acquired Connexin, who are also in Hull. I guess there's the potential threat of increased competition to the extent that Connexin has overbuilt the MS3 network. What are your thoughts about that acquisition and how it might affect MS3?
Yeah, it doesn't make too much difference to us, Richard, to be honest. Connexin are a good local brand. They sponsor HKR, the rugby team there. They sponsor the arena, right? It's a known local brand that's managed to do well over time. Cityfibre's coming in and is obviously going to bring new, larger brands over time, but actually that trade-off between the kind of locally known brand and those nationals who have never actually been in Hull before, because KCOM's not traditionally been fully open for wholesale, means that I imagine it's much of muchness for us. They're a smaller network than ours, and we'll carry on doing what we're doing really well, I think.
Okay, an amount of overbuild?
There is an amount of overbuild. You're absolutely right, Richard.
There is an amount. So that knocks that question on the head. And you said your head offices are within 5 or 6 miles of each other. So what about that competition for the best people?
Yeah.
Have you seen a bit of movement?
I think in the early days when we both started this journey and we started building the businesses up, although we don't compete from a network perspective or even the geographical areas that we put our network, yes, there was talent, there's been talent, there's a finite pool of talent, and we try and compete for that talent. So I guess in the early days there was a little bit of that, but by and large it's settled down, really, and if anything it's quite nice to have a couple of operators out there, and it keeps them all on their toes.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, Hull is a great city for telecoms, right? It has always had a long-term incumbent that was innovative and did some fantastic things, especially when Sean was running it.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And as a result, it's had KCOM, it's got Connexin, it's got Quickline, it's got MS3, it had Geocom, right? For a relatively smallish city, it's actually got a wealth of telecoms history and telecoms talent. Yep. So with some of those businesses changing their business models, KCOM having slightly less staff than it had a few years ago, actually there's some great people we can go at. And I think actually we're both pretty lucky to be operating in that area where you've got some really talented telecoms professionals.
Yeah, I can't argue with that at all. Hull has got a very rich and proud history of telco. It's been 1904 was the incumbent operator, so over 120 years of generations after generations of people who worked in the sector. So it's a very rich vein of talent for the sector, and I think we've both benefited from that, haven't we?
Yeah. So still quite friendly then.
Yeah, we're
in terms of competing for the best people.
We'll grab a coffee or a beer whenever we see each other. We're okay, Richard.
Yeah, fantastic. So in terms of your position today, obviously I've interviewed both of you separately. Your position today in terms of your RFS, your ambitions for the future, your customer bases. I start with you again, Guy. Where are you today? Where do you want to be in the next 2, 3, 4 years?
We're very transparent with our figures. It's our policy on that. So as it sits today, we're at about 207,000 RFS on about 234,000 homes passed and about just under 18,000 connected customers on that. We only started adding customers to the network 2.5 years ago, so we're really pleased with what we do there. We'll continue growing the customer base. We'll continue building the network out. In terms of long-term targets, that I think in terms of RFS and things, the market will determine that over the next few years, and access to funds, etc. As I say, we're quite a rarity in that we are debt-free and it's fully equity invested. The great thing there is I'm not accruing enormous amounts of interest per year, and when I start reporting EBITDA at the end of positive at the end of this year, that translates into cash. But obviously that does mean that we'll wait until the markets are more sensible before we commit to a huge RFS target. And like everyone else, getting that network connected, getting billing customers is everything for us at the moment.
And we'll be around about 200,000 premises passed at the end of this year. We've got when you look at the 4 contracts that we've got, the commitment around that we've publicly announced is we'll have about 180,000 funded premises by the end of the build, which is probably 2027, 28. Another 200,000 commercial premises that are wrapped around those funded premises. It makes no sense just to build to the funded premises. We do need clusters. So we'll have a premise count of around about 500,000. That is fully funded. So we are relatively unique in the UK. So we are fully financed already. We've got a debt package in place that will fund all that. We have Northleaf Capital Partners who stand behind us and have been hugely supportive all the way through the journey of the last 4 years, and we've got £300 million of subsidy to attract once we build these premises. So all that financing packaging is locked down. We just need to build it in these difficult areas now.
So last question, and you're both in the industry. There's so much talk about consolidation. Seems to me there's a little bit more talk than action, but I guess from being in the industry, what's your view on the UK as a whole, all this talk of consolidation? Where will it go? Where will it end up? How are you feeling about it? I guess, Sean, you first.
I can start. Yeah, I guess there's clearly going to be consolidation in some shape or form. It might have taken a little bit longer than others thought. There have been some notable deals. When you look at Briscoe and Atomnia, and you look at the fibre deal and Connexin recently, so deals are happening. So it's not stopped. I just think, but it will speed up. I think there's 2 overhangs right now. There's the Cityfibre refinancing that is what everyone's waiting for. There's GigaClear to a certain extent. Then there's the VMO Netco Servco split and how that was all going to pan out. There's 2 or 3 big shadows that we need to get through, I think. And then once all that's happened, I suspect we'll see the activity accelerate.
Okay.
Yeah, totally agree. Until those 3 things happen, there is uncertainty in the market. And once they are done, everyone knows where they are. And anyone moving before that is at high risk. And fundamentally, if we all consolidated tomorrow, if we all signed the paperwork this evening and consolidate tomorrow, you'd have one amazing business that would take on and smash Openreach and Virgin. Unfortunately, if only 3 sign on and the others don't, it's a very different story from a debt perspective. So we know where we've got to get to. It's going to take time. Whether there will be 3 national networks or 4 is up for debate in 10 years' time. The important thing for businesses like my own and Sean's is we want to control that timing and agenda, right? Let's get the business to cash flow positive as quickly as we can, and then we will do the timing when all of those other things happen. So we're not in a situation we need to do an acquisition, and so we won't. But long term, of course, that's where the UK needs to get to. Otherwise, Openreach will always win because it will have the scale advantage.
Yeah.
You know, fundamentally, Openreach is laughing when it looks at 50 or 60 altnets who each run 50 or 60 help desks, 50 or 60 backhaul networks, 50 or 60 NOCs. You know, and if we can't sort it out quickly through consolidation, we have to take some steps on collaboration to make it work quicker. So that is more altnets working with other altnets to look at efficiencies, shared services, working with ISP partners who can help drive penetration. I think over the next year or two, for especially that mid-tier, collaboration is arguably more important in the sector than consolidation.
And just to add, just to put a final bit of colour onto that, Richard, as well. What are we now at? 85% of the UK with a gigabit capable connection. That's been driven by the altnets.
Yes.
This would not have happened without the altnets. All of us, every single one of us. BT were dragging their heels and trying to sweat the copper asset as much as they could until we all piled in. So I think we should all be very. Who knows what it's going to look like? But we should all be very proud of what we've done for UK PLC to drive the change with Openreach and everybody else to try and get to a number that is now 85% covered and will be at some point very nearly 100% covered.
Yeah, look, I'm totally 100% agree with that. In the keynote that I did earlier, I said in 30 years in the industry, this is the best infrastructure competition we've ever had in the UK. It's fantastic for UK, it's fantastic for customers. And you're quite right that without it, BT would not be building 1.1 million a quarter. They wouldn't have a target of 25 million. They might not even be focusing on full fibre, actually, because there was a period where they weren't.
We'd still be on G-Fast rollout, wouldn't we, Richard?
Well,
Let's be honest.
Well, quite possibly. There was a time when that was Openreach's strategy, was G-Fast, and actually full fibre was this niche little trial that might not go anywhere. And you're right, as soon as the altnets piled in, it did change Openreach's mind. And that has been good, I think, for Openreach and for all the altnets to have that proper free market competition rather than, I guess, the simulated competition that Ofcom has tried their best to put in place through regulation, but it's never as good as a real thing.
And transformational for end users around the country, right, for homes and businesses. Those in rural areas whose speeds are literally increasing 100-fold when Quicline turn up, and those building in urban areas, especially urban former monopolies, who are now able to buy connectivity and broadband at half the price, a third of the price that they were paying 3 years ago, right? And no matter that we're doing different things, the combined outcome is brilliant long-term outcomes for consumers and businesses.
I always say we don't just build networks, we don't just sell broadband, we change people's lives. That's what we do.
No, there you go. Let's finish on that note. We change people's lives. Sean, Guy, that's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for watching. See you again soon.